Google just released Gemini 3 Flash, and this is their workhorse model focused on cost to performance and output speed. From what I've seen initially, I'm very impressed. I find that often people focus on the frontier models, GPT 5.2, Gemini 3 Pro, or Claude Opus 4.5, without realizing that each of these companies are putting out a whole model family. And in reality, it's the model families that have to go head to head with each other, not the individual models. In particular, the Flash or mini tier model is very important because if we go to a site like OpenRouter, we see that most of the usage is landing on these smaller distal models. And the reason for that is that unlike people who are using ChatGPT or the Gemini app who are paying a fixed fee, people who are using the models through the API to develop different apps and tools are paying per token. So it makes a lot of sense for them to optimize for the price to performance of these tokens. And that's why developers choose the Flash or Mini models, because they land on the price to performance sweet spot. It's like how you wouldn't hire a PhD to teach elementary school maths, because you would be paying for a lot of capability and training that you don't need. And that's why Gemini 3 Flash is so important. It's going to be Google's most used model of the Gemini 3 family. Coming into Google's blog post here, we can see that the benchmarks are absolutely stunning. We see that in most benchmarks, Gemini 3 Flash is performing above Gemini 2.5 Pro, and in some isolated cases, even slightly edging out Gemini 3 Pro. And when compared to models like Claude Sonnet 4.5 or GPT 5.2, these frontier models are way more expensive than Gemini 3 Flash, but Gemini 3 Flash is still able to occasionally tie, or in some rare cases, beat those models. In particular, we can see that on very difficult academic questions, like those in Humanities Last Exam or GPQA Diamond, Gemini 3 Flash is coming very close to Gemini 3 Pro, whereas in coding tasks like SWE Bench Verified, it even slightly beats Gemini 3 Pro. And this suggests that Gemini 3 Flash might have been slightly better tuned in than Gemini 3 Pro. That being said, Google will likely fix this by improving the post-training in a future non-preview Gemini 3 Pro variant. We also see that Google has significantly enhanced the multimodal reasoning capabilities of Gemini 3 Flash, so we can definitely expect a new, improved Nano Banana 2 model or a Gemini 3 Flash native audio model to be very powerful. And if we scroll down, we see that Google is really optimizing for cost to performance. Gemini 3 Flash uses 30% fewer tokens on average than 2.5 Pro to solve these complex problems. And this is surprisingly important because it's not enough to have low per token costs if you're using a lot of tokens. This is really a complaint that people have had with the Quen reasoning models or GPT 5.2, where the model thinks for very long, and often it can be more expensive than a model that has a higher per token price but reasons for shorter. If we take a look at the pricing, we can see that there has been a small bump, up from 30 cents per million tokens in to 50 cents, and from $2.5 per million output tokens to $3 per million output tokens. In my experience, I'd say that the large bump in model intelligence from 2.5 Flash definitely justifies the small price increase. But it's also interesting to see that this has been a trend across the industry, where if we look at models like Claude Haiku 4.5, the price also has been bumped there slightly by a margin of 25%. And if we compare to Gemini 2.0 Flash, we really see that Gemini 3 Flash is a completely different class of model. My guess here is that the closed labs are seeing the prowess of open source models and the low pricing of these models in general, so they're choosing to go for a medium tier model in order to avoid competing directly with those open source models. Now, Google hasn't disclosed how big Gemini 3 Flash is or how the model was trained. However, I think we're able to make some educated guesses. We know that all of the recent models major labs have been releasing are a sparse mixture of expert models. In particular, I believe Gemini 3 Flash is likely the recently rumored 1.2 trillion parameter model that Google was said to be licensing to Apple. And we see that Gemini 3 Flash is being priced slightly higher than Kimi K2 Thinking, which is a 1 trillion parameter model. So it checks out that Gemini 3 Flash being at a slightly higher price point is a slightly bigger model, i.e. the 1.2 trillion parameter count. Naturally, looking at first-party benchmarks, I was a little bit skeptical that the model was benchmaxed, so I ran the model through two of my own evaluations. And these evaluations really confirm the prowess of Gemini 3 Flash. If we look at my benchmark SVG bench, where LLMs are instructed to draw SVGs and checked against a set of requirements, we can see that Gemini 3 Flash comes in at number 8, narrowly beating Claude Sonnet 4.5, which is probably a much larger and much more expensive model. If we look at Gatebench, where models are asked to read logic gate diagrams and parse out these Boolean expressions, we can see that Gemini 3 Flash is scoring number 1, even above its bigger cousin Gemini 3 Pro. So these benchmarks really confirmed my suspicions in the model being benchmarks were pretty much moot. Next, let's look at some of the demos I've created here in a Colab notebook. As we're going through the demo here, you can notice what types of tasks we're giving to the model. In general, these are tasks that were unlocked with the last generation of frontier models, and now can be safely handled by a cheaper Flash model. So we're not comparing against models like Gemini 3 Pro. Instead, we're comparing against Gemini 2.5 Pro. And if you're thinking, hey, what about the tasks that Gemini 2.5 Flash were capable of doing? Nowadays, many of those use cases are probably better served by even cheaper models out there, like the open models, for example, DeepSeek V3.2, Kimi K2 Thinking, etc. So here we use the API key that we got from Google AI Studio to create a client with the Google Gen AI SDK. In this test, we're going to take structured data extraction to the next level. We're going to give the model a search tool, allowing it to do agentic search before creating out the structured output. So here the model is given the DuckDuckGo search tool, which it can call up to 10 times until it has to return a list of the top 10 Google DeepMind leaders. And we see here that the model has done this really well. It called the tool 6 times and then came back with a list of the leaders at Google DeepMind with all of their related information. I personally checked the data here and it's completely correct. So this is an example of how Gemini 3 Flash is able to unlock the use case of search agents plus JSON data extraction. Next, we can take a look at multimodal reasoning and spatial reasoning. So here, the model is given an image of a computer motherboard, and it is asked to generate bounding boxes for each of the PCIe slots on the image. And here we see that the model is able to do it really well. It identifies all 4 PCIe slots in the image without confusing it with the DDR5 RAM slots over here. Next, we do some video understanding and reasoning with Gemini 3 Flash. So here I've given it my last video about Gemini 2.5 native audio, and I had it generate a transcript for the video. With the previous generation of models, I found that Gemini 2.5 Flash couldn't do this very well, and in general it would either have issues with the formatting of the transcript or there would be artifacts in the transcript outputted. But here we see that Gemini 3 Flash knocks this out of the park. It's able to follow the formatting that I specify one-to-one, and there are no significant errors in the text here. So this unlocks a lot of video multimodal processing use cases. And because this is such a token-intensive use case, using a Flash model instead of a Pro model helps slash the cost massively. Here, we're using the model's video reasoning capabilities to extract out a thumbnail for a given video. So here I've given it a video for Gemini 3 Flash, and I've asked it to analyze it and output a timestamp for the frame best useful as a thumbnail. And down here we see that the model has identified a timestamp and it has been able to extract out one of the frames here, and I think this is a pretty good choice. So the last use case we're going to look at here in the Colab notebook is coding. And Google has really been pushing Gemini 3 Flash as a coding model, where the lead of the Gemini team's developer relations, Logan Kilpatrick, even came out and said that Gemini 3 Flash is the best model for agentic coding. Despite the pretty high SWE bench score, I kind of doubt that. That being said, the model in my testing is definitely on par with Gemini 2.5 Pro, or in some cases even better for agentic coding. So here we've given the model a PDF, and it's able to reason through this person's resume and generate a corresponding personal website. So I downloaded the code for the website and opened it in an HTML file. So here we see that the website is pretty well done, it's very clean, and probably on the level of something a Gemini 2.5 Pro would create. So in general, I'd say that this is a pretty well done personal website. Another use case that I found Gemini 3 Flash pretty strong at is the whole field of computer use agents. Computer use agents really was unlocked with the last generation of frontier models, like Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude Sonnet 4, etc. However, back then, the models were unreliable, they were very slow, and very expensive to use. And with Gemini 3 Flash, a lot of those problems have been solved. Overall, I find the capability to be somewhere between Claude Sonnet 4.5 and Claude Haiku 4.5, while being cheaper and faster than both of those models. So here we're asking the model to compare GPT 5.2 and Gemini 3 Pro, and then it's supposed to use LibreOffice to create a simple file to document its findings, including links for sources. And we're seeing the model understands the task here. It opens the browser, does research, and then comes to LibreOffice to create the document. Overall, I think that Gemini 3 Flash is a really good upgrade, with a significant bump in intelligence, multimodal reasoning capabilities, tool calling ability, and coding ability. And it's definitely a very solid replacement for Gemini 2.5 Pro, being both smarter and cheaper. In its price range, Gemini 3 Flash has no competitor that offers the same million token context window and the same multimodal reasoning capabilities. So I think a lot of people will be building apps with the Gemini 3 Flash model. Personally, I can say that I've already integrated it into my daily AI news workflow. So I find that Google has really earned a really strong position in the whole area of mini and flash models. Okay, that's it for today's video. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.